Hello, this is Nick Cuccinella here, your host with the Ministry Corner, and today we're going to talk about strong delusion, grace alone. So let's get going here. You know how a lot of churches preach, for by grace you're saved through faith. That not yourself is a gift of God, not a result of works, that no man may boast. Okay, and that's what they believe. And they said there is no law. But if you go to Matthew chapter 5, Jesus said something different. So take your Bibles. You can use King James or New American Standard or the ESV. That's what I recommend. And in verse 17 of chapter 5, he says, "Do not think I come to abolish the law or the prophets. I did not come to abolish, but fulfilled." I found out that word fulfilled has an interesting meaning. In Greek, it means loosen down. And in Hebrew, that same word means uphold. So then we could say by the grace of Christ, the law was loosened down, but still uphold or intact. Now, if you go down to verse 18, it says, "Truly I say unto you, until heaven and earth pass away, not one of the smallest letter of stroke from the law would pass away, till all is accomplished." Till heaven and earth pass away. It says not one letter of the law would pass away. And then finally in verse 19 it says, "Whoever annuls one of the least of these commandments and teaches others to do the same shall be the least in the kingdom of heaven. And whoever keeps and teaches them, he shall be called the great in the kingdom of heaven." So there you have a contradiction where a lot of churches are preaching grace alone, and Jesus is saying, no, the law is there too. Wow. Now, if you go to 1 Corinthians 7:19, the Apostle Paul made an interesting statement. And this is what he said. And he was the apostle to the Gentiles, by the way. "Circumcision is nothing, and uncircumcision is nothing, but what matters is keeping the commandments of God." Keeping the commandments of God. Now that's very interesting, huh? Now you're wondering, well, what else then? Good question. Go to 1 John chapter 2. 1 John chapter 2. Starting with verse 3. Now, before I say this verse, let's share something. Remember Jesus made a statement that he's told a story where he said, "Lord, Lord, didn't I prophesy in your name? Didn't I cast out demons?" And he said, "Depart from me, I never knew you." Now, why did he never knew him? The answer is here in 1 John chapter 2, verse 3. "By this we know that we have come to know him, if we keep his commandments. The one who says, 'I have come to know him,' and does not keep his commandments, is a liar, and the truth is not in him." Interesting. "But whoever keeps his word in him, the love of God has truly been perfected. By this we know that we are in him. The one who says he abide in him ought himself to walk in the same manner as he walked," meaning walking as Jesus walked. In John 15:10 it says, Jesus said, "Follow my commandments as I followed my Father's commandments." And the Father's commandments are the 10 commandments. So if we're to walk as he does, then we're to follow his commandments as he's followed the Father's commandments. What are the commandments he's talking about following his commandments? Go to Matthew chapter, I believe it's 25. This 22, chapter 22, starting with verse 36. "Teacher," this is regarding a lawyer asking him a question, what is the greatest or the great commandment in the law? And Jesus' response said, you love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, and all your mind. This is the great foremost commandment. The second is like it. You shall love your neighbor as yourself. On these two commandments depends the whole law and the prophets. Meaning the first 5 refer to loving God is the first 5 laws of Torah law in Exodus 20. And then the last 5 commandments of loving your neighbor are the last 5 laws of Torah law in Exodus 20. Hence, the 10 commandments in 2 statements. What else is of Jesus' commandments? Love one another and testimony in him. So now you ask yourself the question, well, if that's true, then how did we just think it was all about grace? If you go to Ephesians 2, and I'm going to do a little bit of parallel here with other scriptures from other versions of the Bible to blow you guys away. Ephesians 2:15 says, by abolishing in his flesh the enmity, which is the law of the commandments contained in ordinances. Now, I want to share with you something else here in the old NIV. So, NIV says something very totally contradictory to what I just shared. By abolishing in his flesh the law with his commandments and regulations. Now wait a minute. Ephesians 2:15 said, by abolishing in his flesh the enemy, which is the law of commandments contained in ordinances. The ordinances are abolished, not the commandments of God. Now, go to Colossians 2:15. First, we're going to do the NIV since I'm already here. Having canceled a written code with his regulations that was written against us, he stood opposed to us. He took it away, nailing it to the cross. Okay. The written code with his regulations. People think that means the commandments. In Colossians 2:15 in the New American Standard, it says something a little bit, or actually, excuse me, let's take that, change that to Authorized Version, King James. In Colossians 2:15, it says something a little bit different. 2:14, excuse me. Blotting out the handwriting of ordinances that was against us, which was contrary to us, and took it out of the way and nailed it to the cross. Blotting out the ordinances, the written handwriting of ordinances. It says nothing about commandments there. Now, another verse I'd like to share with you. In NIV, it will say, in Revelation chapter 22, verse 14, blessed are those who wash their robes, that they may have a right to the tree of life and may go through the gates into the city. Now, Old King James says something quite different from that verse. Very, very different. So go back now to Revelation 22, and now we'll do the same verse, 22, verse 14. Blessed are they that do his commandments, that they may have a right to the tree of life and may enter through the gates into the city. That do his commandments. Well, that's quite interesting. Verses by right washing your robes. All right. Now, another verse. 1 John 5, 3, or 2, verse 2. By this we know that we love the children of God, when we love God and observe his commandments. And this is the love of God, that we keep his commandments, and his commandments are not burdensome. Now let's see what the NIV says about that. Okay. Here we go. Verse 3. We'll start with verse 2, excuse me. This is how we know we love the children of God, by loving God and carrying out his commands. This is the love for God, to obey his commands, and the commands are not burdensome. There it says commands, not commandments. So that's kind of interesting. And then, I think finally, Psalm 119. Verse 142. Your righteousness is an everlasting righteousness, and your law is truth. Verse 151 of 119. You are near, O Lord, and all your commandments are truth. So from this we could say the spirit of truth and the law of the spirit are one and the same, because law is truth and truth is law. So, from doing all that, then Romans 3:27. First I'll do the New American Standard, and same as in King James. So here's the New American Standard, what it says. Verse 27. Where's your boasting? Is it excluded by what kind of law? Of works? No, but by law of faith. For we maintain that a man is justified by faith apart from the work of the law. Or is God the God of Jews only? Yes, he is not only the God, he is also the God of the Gentiles also. Yes, the Gentiles also. Since indeed God will justify the circumcision by faith, and us through faith is one, do we then nullify the law through faith? May it never be. On the contrary, we establish the law. Now, go to the NIV. This will get you. .327 NIV said, where then is your boasting? Is it included by what principle? Look at this. And you remember that? It said that where's your boasting? It's included by what kind of law? Here it said principle. And here it does not mention law of faith. It says something totally different. So here we go again. Where then is boasting? Is this excluded by what principle? On what? Observing the law? No, but on that of faith. See, they take out that faith is a law. Here it says faith is a law. Here it does not. Okay? So, with all that said in mind, I believe, no doubt, faith is a law. The ordinances were abolished, not the commandments of God. And it's called not only the law of faith, it's also called the law of Christ. It's called the perfect law, the royal law, the law of the Spirit, or the Spirit of truth, because we already know that truth means law. The bottom line is this, folks. You can't have sin unless there's some type of law in play. Because sin is a transgression of the law. And sin is another word for lawlessness, without law. So how can you have sin unless there's some type of law in play? Okay? Finally, the New Testament was, I'll put my laws in their hearts and mind. It says the word law. It didn't exclude law at all. It He said, I'll put my law in their hearts and mind. Interesting, huh? So, how did we get here? How did we get so far away from God's truth? Simple. Newer translations of the Bible have distorted God's eternal word originally what was meant to say. Therefore, a generation would use these newer translations of the Bible that are flawed, believing it is truth, believing the lie for truth, which is like the strong delusion. They took a lie for truth. Not a good thing. So, the commandments of God, through the law of faith, is intact with grace. Grace abolished the ordinances, the ceremonial law. That's been abolished. So when it says that we're not under the workings of the law, they're talking about the ceremonial law. They're not talking about the Ten Commandments. Okay? So, the bottom line is this. Faith is a law. The law of Christ. Okay? It even says that in the Bible. Call it the law of Christ. In fact, for those that dispute me, it's in I marked it down. Give me a second here. There it is. 1 Corinthians 9:21. Apostle Paul said, to those who are without the law, as without the law, though not being without the law of God, but under the law of Christ, so that I might win those who are without the law. Call that the law of Christ. So Apostle Paul not only called law of faith, he calls it the law of Christ. Okay? So what would be the law of Christ? In a nutshell, love God, love your neighbors. 10 Commandments, 2 statements. Love one another. Testimony in Jesus. Therefore, God is love, and those doing those things are the fulfillment of love for God. So, there is no grace alone. There is a law. It's called the law of faith or the law of Christ. Either way you want to say what it is. That is truth. God's word is truth. God's word does not go void. There's no way to look around this. I studied this for about a year and a half, and I've come to the conclusion, faith is the law, and grace abolished the ordinances, but not the commandments of God. So what does that mean about the Sabbath? Well, Jesus said, man was made for the Sabbath, not the Sabbath made for man. Or, you know, the Sabbath was there for man to rest. And so I think any day was fine with the Lord as long as it's consistent. Because if you read Hebrews chapter 4, it talks about, and then he mentioned another day. And I think it mentioned about that Joshua would have mentioned another day if they have given him rest. The whole idea is to have a time of rest just like God. And unfortunately today a lot of churches don't even follow the Sabbath at all. They have these coffee houses that encourage people to buy and sell. They have, sell food at a coffee house. That is wrong. I mean, unless the people take their Sabbaths on Saturday, I guess it's fine. But the churches should actually tell people, have a sign up, we encourage you to take a Sabbath rest as God commands us to. And in Hebrews chapter 4, by the way, it mentions about to not be disobedient and not enter into that rest. It's important that we do enter into that rest. But that's it about pretty much in a nutshell, though. Faith is a law. It's either called the law of faith or the law of Christ. The ordinances were abolished by God's grace, but not the commandments of God. They're intact. They're eternal. they will not pass away until heaven and earth pass away, because Jesus said so. And that's about it. This is Nick, your host, Nick Kuchin, Ministry Corner. Thanks for listening. Until next time, God bless. Bye-bye.